All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's not quite 7 o'clock, looking more like 7:40 tonight. But again, better late than never. It's the yard sign. Thank you so much for watching. Johnny Torres with you as always. We appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and follow us on all of our social media platforms. And don't forget that you can subscribe to the audio version of our podcast over at the Tech Overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon. As you can see, got a fresh face joining me tonight. Actually, not his first time on the show. We'll talk about that a little bit. But first, let's run down the topics. 51 states. What is going on over in D.C.? I mean, aside from them just printing off money, like it's a bad elementary school copier. Also, have verdict. Now what? Floyd verdict came down, and we're going to dissect, of course, the aftermath of that and what does that mean for cases like this going forward. And GOP governor for California, it is it a likelihood, and of course, who has already announced, who's already throwing their name in the mix for that fiasco, because, I mean, that's going to be a circus sideshow for sure. And then, of course, we're going to close it off with a local topic, which is Hillsborough County and the mask mandate. And amazingly enough, we still have one. And funny enough, there was a rumor for about a second that Pinellas might repeal theirs. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Not with the Liberals in the Pinellas County Commission and St. Petersburg City Council. So let me go ahead and let me see. Let's remote here. There we go. Again, kind of, as you can tell, doing the show, the different setup tonight. Joining me today, again, not for the first time. He's actually, he was off in the shadows the first time he was on the show, but we're happy to have him back and going to get to learn more about him tonight. Nick Williamson joining us. What's up, buddy?
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Yeah, not my first time on the show, and then not my first time technically on air on your show,
That's right.
which might have had a lot too much to drink at that particular moment for that show.
Yeah, well,
But no, I'm pleased to be
you hung
here.
back, and then all of a sudden you were like chiming in. You were like, you were almost like the fifth man, over on the bench, chiming in from time to time in the show.
The
But that
hype
was
man. You guys need the hype man. I got
that's
it.
right, that's right. And so, we've been working on trying to get you on the show for quite a while now, and we appreciate you making time for us. And we're of
Not
course
a
going to
problem.
get to talk about quite a bit tonight, being that it's just you and I. Just one of those crazy weeks where things happened last minute and we weren't able to get some of the usual faces together. So shout out to Anibal, Joe Wicker, Christopher Kylan, all the usual guys who couldn't join us tonight, but I know they wanted to be here. But nonetheless, the news continues to happen. The world continues to revolve, and so we must talk about what is happening in the news today.
Yeah, and
Um,
so I'm sure most of those guys are probably going to be biting their tongue when they listen to me. I will say we almost need an asterisk at the bottom of like political knowledge comparative to some of those other gentlemen and ladies that show up. I'm going to be way on the lower side of that.
Well, and for those of you seeing me disappear off screen here, fear not, just trying to run the show and be on the show at the same time. But thank you, everybody, for watching and putting up with our little shenanigans here. Um, Nick, you're also a local business owner. You're in the real estate industry. I would imagine, especially being here in the Tampa Bay area where the real estate industry is just exploding right now. Um, how how much has changed over the past year in your industry, positively, negatively? What are some of the different factors that are going into the real estate industry, and why do you think that despite what most would say is an economic downturn in most of the countries, that Florida is just on fire?
And that's a really good question. And I actually I run another podcast that's completely juxtaposition kind of this, but we discussed that on ours. And basically, when you're talking about business, real estate doesn't change a lot from supply and demand. That's probably the number one factor in real estate. A lot of people try to dictate a lot of other factors. Well, because of COVID, a lot of people were fearful of selling a home, and which rightfully so. I'm not saying that's not an optimal fear,
Yeah.
but because of that, every neighborhood, if there was 1,000 homes, two were for sale. Well, we still
Wow.
had 10 or 12 buyers for every neighborhood. And now, as we found out, I personally think our governor has kind of been a rock star handling a lot of what we've seen in the media, a lot of what we've
Sure.
seen with COVID. He's really done a great job. And so now that we have 1,000 people a day moving to Florida, like a significant amount.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
and, and so because of
So
that,
you are seeing a lot of out of state buyers. I mean, is that
yes.
really what's driving this train right now?
So there's two parts of it. I think the first part is the supply and demand, and we're getting more people in. And Florida, relatively, is an easier market to buy in than a lot of liberal states. Our price point is significantly lower. The second, I would say, of that whole factor are there a lot of investors. Most, I would say, homes under, let's say, 300,000 probably have a cash offer the first day on the market for a potential investor up north wanting to rent it. And it makes a lot of sense. If they're getting a lot of rentals that aren't renting, then it makes sense that they want to buy down here just to get a cash stream revenue
Sure.
moving forward. So that cash offer, along with the people coming in, has really driven this market boom. I think the first domino to fall, which I think is going to happen quicker than people say, my first guess is the interest rate for home loans increases. Once it gets to about 4.5, 5.5, 6, I think you watch that first domino fall to slow down the market. And that's just because buyers' money doesn't go as far when buying a home.
Well, I mean, at some point, it has to come to a screeching halt, right? I mean, because we're not only talking about home prices have gone up, I think, what, 40, 50 grand just in the past 3 to 6 months,
Yeah,
but also the building supplies have also, the price of building supplies have gone up astronomically. There's a client of mine, who does a radio show and talks to people that are in construction and are different types of home vendors. I mean,
right.
you talk to a roof guy, a tile guy. I mean, they don't have enough product for all the projects they have right now. I mean,
Yeah,
these roofing guys are months behind. The company that produces the tiles and the different roof and building supplies are all like months behind, and so of course that drives the prices up, and so it's at some point, right? It's got to give. I mean, do you think it's going to be the interest rate, or do you think it's naturally just going to come to a breaking point?
so that question poses a lot of new build issues. What we've seen is actually builders know that if someone went under a contract, let's say 6, 7, 8 months ago, that
Yeah,
same home might be $40,000 more to resell. And if they're having issue getting wood, because wood's gone up 3 times, HVAC systems have gone up by like 30 or 40%. Uh, and part of this is because of they've minimized the workforce, right, with COVID.
right.
So even appliances are slowing way down. And once we see all those things, what we've noticed is some builders have put a hex on some contracts. They've just canceled them. The buyer is freaking out and upset. And the builder goes, "Hey, for us to even make the home for what we promised you, we have to raise it 20,000." And then the
Sure.
builder says, "Hey, we still want a profit." Right? And I get both sides of that coin. A lot of seller buyers have said, "I want to sue the builder," but you technically, the builder's contract says if they don't close the home in 2 years, the home becomes null. The contract becomes null and void. If you were going to sue them, they just wouldn't work on the home for 2 years. The contract would become null and void. They'd kill it anyway. So it's unfortunate that we see some buyers in that situation. Most builders have muscled through it, but some newer communities really have struggled for that very reason. I don't think supplies will be the issue. I think it'll just increase more, right? Because we're talking about demand. The
Right.
demand stays the same, the supply keeps diminishing. So the price will keep going up. I think what's going to happen is inevitably, if you see the switch from interest rate, that will be the biggest indicator that buyers will slow down. Um, and I think we saw something similar in 04, 05, 06, 07. Uh, the crash, we won't see the same because my brokerage out of the last 200 homes we've sold, maybe we've had one arm. Most people have a straight line mortgage. So whatever their monthly payment was the day they closed is going to stay that way for the next 30 years. So
Wow.
unless they lose a job, right, the payment doesn't change.
Yeah.
Until I see that factor change where buyers are like, oh, it's 6%, so let me get an arm to buy into 2 or 3%, then I would say, okay, now we're looking at a crash situation. But I think what we're going to see is an adjustment situation when the demand equals supply. Then you'll see homes on the market stay longer, which inevitably means price will slowly drop.
Well, and obviously this wasn't one of our topics for tonight, but just to kind of, bring it to a close. I mean, we haven't seen arms in what, like 10 years? I
Yeah,
mean,
they're
they're
pretty.
out there, but I mean, it's not, you're not seeing them as regularly as you are your typical loans.
Correct. And the reason, and I think one of our, while we're talking about states and 51 states, I'll kind of tie it into there. But I think the interest rate will continue to climb steadily because you can't take $1.9 trillion out of the economy, and the
Right.
banks have to work harder to get the same amount of money. In doing so, that means they're going to have to charge us, the consumer, more. And so my expectation is over the next year or two, you're going to watch the interest rate climb at 1% or 2, which will slow down the buying power.
Yeah,
Hopefully
so
that made
let's go
sense.
ahead and jump into our first topic, which is, is there a possibility of a 51st state? I mean, we're talking, one of the things Obama said in 2008 was that he wanted to fundamentally change this country. Obviously, Republicans took that very seriously and took it as a threat almost, really. And so now we're seeing Biden, who was supposedly, allegedly, the moderate in this situation. And I've talked about how he really just goes with the wind. He's not he's whatever kind of Democrat you want him to be, really. Um, we're seeing him push for DC, or his administration, DC to be a 51st state. We know Democrats have been pushing for making Puerto Rico a 51st state. Uh, you know, I don't think in the current makeup, especially given how close we are in terms of Republicans having a majority in the House and Senate, that they're going to pull something like this. Or do you think it's about time to make DC and maybe even Puerto Rico a state?
So that I understand both sides of this coin. So I don't want to say DC has no right to something because they do miss out on a lot of civil stuff that I understand they don't have.
Yeah,
But on the reverse side of that coin, that gives DC the greatest majority of power almost of any per person capita area. You have a bunch of politically minded people for that term living there almost any given term.
right.
And then on top of that, you're going to get 2 senators and probably like 6 or 7 Congress people. The Congress people won't be a drastic flip in any part of major suspension of this. But the Senate, that means, like, I saw a study that showed they would get, for every like 50,000 people or whatever it was, they would have like a Senate person, which is the most drastic number they've ever seen. So I think it should happen? No. I think the country has been set up to self balance and self correct itself awkwardly perfectly in the way the founding fathers set it up. I mean, to be fair, probably some of the more brilliant, wise men to put something on paper. And I think we overlook that because we have the internet. I do believe, I understand the expectation of if you win the popular vote, you should win it all. But if you look back even on certain things like when uh, Trump won and he lost by a few 100,000 or a million, whatever the number was,
Yeah,
you look back at the country and the whole thing was painted red. So does
right.
the person that owns 10 acres worth less than the person who lives in an apartment complex with 20,000 people? It's hard to kind of balance out what land and space use is worth. And I don't think Puerto Rico or DC should get um, a lock. If they're going to do it, I would prefer them to do it with both because maybe that will self balance itself. But
Right.
I don't want to see DC get the final hammer because they will. They'll get the final hammer.
Well, there's that meme that's been going around for a while now that says that they should make, and obviously this isn't jest, but they should go ahead and make DC and Puerto Rico the 51st and 52nd state because 52 is indivisible. And then we would truly be a nation indivisible, one nation under God. So it's a terrible joke, but it actually makes a good point. To what you
Yeah,
just said. I mean, maybe we just go all in, add them. Look, the truth is that we cover so much of the expenses in Puerto Rico. I mean, there's a huge. I think it's a majority percentage of the residents of Puerto Rico actually work for the government of Puerto Rico, and they already have representation in Congress. And with the hurricanes, I mean, we've invested billions of dollars in rebuilding that territory, and at this point, there's more Puerto Ricans living in the United States than there even are on the island, and
right.
a lot of them right here in Orlando and Kissimmee. Of course, a lot of them is in New York as well. Um, I don't see us, allowing Puerto Rico to become a sovereign territory at any point. And so, uh, other than the political advantage that it gives them, right? Because more than likely, you're talking about more Democrat senators, more Democrat congressmen or women. I don't really take issue with it, and I think again, it's not the way it was designed. Maybe DC. I would give Puerto Rico statehood before I give DC statehood. Because again, what we've learned time and time again is that there was a very good reason for everything the founding fathers designed, and why mess with it, right? If it's
Yeah.
not broken. But Democrats want to mess with it. They want to change all of it. We talked
So
last week. We were talking about packing the courts.
yeah, and I was gonna bring that up, and I didn't know you were, but it ties in, and I think it's such a short sighted point of view. Let me just throw this scenario out there that would make sense to people on the other side of this coin. Let's say we push for DC and Puerto Rico and packing the courts.
Yeah,
So the Democrats get everything they want. It happens on Biden's late third term. It's not an overnight decision, right? And he doesn't get a chance to push everyone through. A Republican president wins, and because Puerto Rico, we gave them so much money during the Trump administration to help out during the hurricane, most people overlooked that. He actually
yeah,
did a pretty good job trying to supply as much as he possibly could to them.
sure,
They are almost split or close to voting Republican. And then that means you have an influx during the 4 years of a Republican or Democratic president of that person, of that party moving there. So what you're going to see is all of a sudden that flips to red, and that Republican president then picks 4 or 5 justices that are all red or
right,
right leaning. So all of a sudden, what you thought was going to be your holy grail to save this country actually was a knife in your own back. And that's the reason it's done the way it is to avoid either side outweighing the scale. Are there changes that should be made? Yes, but that doesn't mean let's just tip the scale to our side. But what happens is if that scale falls to the other side, you may not like it at all.
right. Well, we've seen, the unintended consequences, mostly on the Democrat side, when they've tried to push for more power and more influence. I mean, the one that cracks me up all the time is the nuclear option, the filibuster. They were
Right.
so excited, and I mean, I remember it was Harry Reid, and he made it seem like, oh man, Republicans really twisted my arm and made me do this, and now we've got this filibuster. Excuse me. Ooh, bit my tongue.
The
This
filibuster.
filibuster back in the Senate, and uh, and now they're calling it racist because everything is racist these days, when how quickly they forget that they were the ones that instituted the filibuster back in the first place, and it just it there's that. I'm trying to remember. There was a couple other things that Democrats did that, again, you know, when you have a good team, in any sport, you can win regardless of the rules, regardless of the way the rules are set. You learn how to win, and you can win by leveraging the rules. And look, that's what Mitch McConnell has been brilliant at. And we look at John Boehner, before, and even the House Republicans now, they have brilliantly been able to navigate the rules and leverage them, to their success. I mean, again, under Trump, they were able to get a lot of things done that a lot of people didn't even realize were happening because the media was so obsessed with trying to take down Trump that they never really gave Republicans the credit in Congress for passing all the things that they did on a bipartisanship level.
Yeah. And I just see if you try to slam dunk your side of the best way to describe it is just slam dunk into the other opponent's face. If it ever flips, you're not going to like the outcome.
Sure.
And the reason it's very balanced that, even when everything is, to be honest, the country's been almost 50-50 for the better part of 21 years,
Right.
right? We were almost, rarely have we seen in a blowout election, yes, Trump may have won by a lot of electoral votes, but he barely snuck by, if at all, on popular vote, right? So you have this 50-50 split. And then you have it again where I think the rules, again, I'm not the best politically person, so this is probably the way you need an asterisk. But if you remember I want to say it was the NFC Championship game where the Saints were playing and there was a blatant pass interference. Everyone saw it. Even the other team was like, "Oh, they should call that." The ball would be on the 2-yard line. The Saints would have won the game. It would have been over. But the rule wasn't instated to do an instant replay, right? And so at that point, they said we should be able to do an instant replay for pass interference. If that would have happened, the Saints would have won. And now what we've seen is I think Trump lost fair and square. I don't think 6 states all colluded against him. But what I do think is we all sat there and watched. This is what it's like when you kind of skirt by the rules. So we may try to stop it. And the Democrats have seen, in my opinion, what it can be like when you skirt by the rules. And I think trying to, there's 18 other topics that fall into here, but allow 2 or 3 more million people to enter our country illegally, give them all the right to vote, and then go, oops, how did Texas flip? Shocker. We kind of we know what you're doing.
Well,
So,
this is really what I think is at hand, because I think Democrats realize that despite how they want to spin the election, I think they realize that they could have easily lost the election. And I think that what they're trying to do now, again, when they're talking about packing the courts, when they're talking about adding Puerto Rico and DC, they are trying to leverage any which way how to gain some additional power. How can we get just enough more power for us to be able to make the fundamental changes that we want? Especially after Trump accomplished everything that he did. I mean, that's the thing. They don't want to give him credit because they didn't like the things that he did. But when he appointed more federal judges than any president before him, when we hit single digit unemployment numbers, record unemployment numbers that we hadn't seen in our nation's history, when you talk about immigration numbers dropping to some of the lowest numbers that we had seen in decades, again, these are all things that scared the heck out of Democrats. And I think especially when you're talking about a potential 2024 candidate in Ron DeSantis, who could very easily borrow the Trump playbook.
yeah, and I would say I would be shocked because both we're going off topic, but both the California and New York governor were supposed to be touted as like the holy grail of the Democratic Party. And what we've realized, both have been god awful. I don't think anyone from New York or California likes that. And it will tie into how do we even get Caitlyn Jenner in there? And I saw that topic later on. But DeSantis, even I posted this on my own page. Bill Maher, who I don't technically agree with politically, he's a comedian. I'll laugh at his one-liner jokes at mostly Republican
Sure.
stuff. But when he goes, Democrats, we got to take issue with how we've treated this. Like, you're like, how do me and Bill Maher agree on something,
Right.
but no one in our House and Senate can agree on squat? No,
Yeah.
you got to be on. You're intentionally trying to do things for power grab, right?
And that's
And
the thing,
that's
like
what.
specifically with Bill Maher, because I watch a lot of his videos on Facebook, and people are surprised when I tend to share some of the things that he says. But the one thing that he'll do, first of all, a lot of his points are thoroughly researched. You know what I mean? So
Oh, he's not an idiot. Yeah,
it's typically not that he's wrong. It's just that I disagree with him, right?
correct.
Because factually he'll be correct. And so when he calls out Democrats, he's usually very, very factual about it, and he's calling them out for the real issues that they have. And to that point, you mentioned Cuomo. I mean, there was a press conference I think this past week where if you are a Democrat, especially at the prominent level of a Cuomo, a governor of one of the largest states in the country in terms of population, and the media is eating you alive at your own press conference, that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
Like I,
Well,
I think as a liberal, your political career is done if the media is even eating you alive at your own press conference.
well, I think it all started, and I think we all can agree. Probably the nipple ring scandal probably started his downfall.
Yeah.
At which point, a lot of other things started coming to light. Uh, but yes, he was touted as amazing after he killed a lot of his elderly people by doing poor choices.
Right.
DeSantis, on the flip side, was like, I am going to protect my elderly. And
Yep.
everyone else, I want you to be health conscious. I want you to think about it, do the smart decision, but I'm not going to financially or physically confine you to stop you from doing what you want to do. I'm going
Right.
to try to keep it up as much as I can, and I'm going to let the mayors of each city kind of dictate what they want. Um, California was like complete lockdown. And when we were talking about did buyers from other states, the funny thing is we had buyers from California. My business partner and I showed them some homes, and they were really beautiful homes, very expensive. And from California, it was like, but to us, it was like, whoa, yeah, this is the cream of the crop.
Right.
Um, and they said, we took them out to dinner, and they were like, oh, thank you. And they were like, we were surprised at how many people wore masks, how many people were health conscious. The servers all weren't. She goes, but if you were over in California, you would have thought we were all licking doorknobs. And
Right.
so that's part of how the media, and I want to say the politics, try to govern and dictate how we are supposed to do things that have come naturally to our freedoms. And one of those things, by changing it up, bringing it back, trying to get an extra couple Senate seats, uh, really tips the scales drastically in their favor, but it could be a double-edged sword. And that's what I feel like Democrats always try to short side things is you go, you might think you're winning, but it might be awful in the long run. Uh, and
Sure.
and so just to end that point, I don't think we should do either. If we do either, I would say I'd give Puerto Rico more props than DC. I think giving DC for their small population, yes, I wish they'd have representation maybe in Congress, but giving it to them in the Senate, it would be, I feel like, would be a disaster because of how
Yeah.
powerful the amount of population they actually cover. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. But again,
Hopefully that makes sense.
the the
Okay.
the issue in Puerto Rico, which is again not the problem that is had in D.C., is that also? I mean, again, we do treat the residents of Puerto Rico differently than we do treat the residents of Washington D.C., even down to our veterans. Our veterans aren't even treated with the same regard as we do. Sorry, I know I'm off screen. With the same regard that we treat our veterans here at home. And again, there are now centuries. I mean, there have been, there we are decades, where we have had soldiers fighting for this country from Puerto Rico, and so again, I think it's only appropriate to go ahead and just make them a full-fledged state. And time has shown that they want it to happen. I mean, they continue to fight it, and they continue to toss it back and forth in their own government. But overwhelmingly, it is shown that most people want them to become a state. And and again, a lot of that has to do with those that already live here. So.
Right.
That's another reason, again, that the population is so large here. All right, moving on to our next topic. Again, we are looking at what's happening. Actually, let me double check. Let me double check our topics here. Okay. So we got the George Floyd verdict, and that came down this past week. And as expected, I mean, we saw a little bit of action, in Minneapolis and in Portland, some of the more predictable places. Not to the extent that I expected. I'll say that. I certainly thought it was going to be a lot worse. We were going to see a lot more activity around the country. Certainly, Derek Chauvin got the guilty verdict all across the board. But does this really change anything? What do you think?
So this is the couple problems I had with everything. I actually I said, whatever the court decides, I'm happy with. We have, what was it, 12 jurors or 18 jurors, whatever the number there were in there.
Yeah.
And I'm not a legal expert, but there was a set number in there. They all heard the facts of the case, and they went down all across the board guilty. Now, which is great, because if anyone's watched that video, you're thinking scumbag and guilty. Here's the problem: is we've allowed politicians to really dictate certain things about how we perceive how the court's supposed to be ran. And the judge, did you watch what the judge said during
I saw some of the clips,
final thing? Yeah. Basically, I watched kind of the final moments, and he goes, I'll be honest, whoever that Minneapolis congresswoman was, and I have no ill will against her, but you basically handed him the greatest get out of jail free card. But I think she knew it. Here's the problem: is I think Fox probably on that level, but very much the liberal ones wanted something not to be guilty. Right. They say they all wanted justice, but they really didn't. What they really wanted was for more bloodshed, brimstone. How do we turn this into another epic problem that the courts got it wrong? White man gets off, black man it's dead. How do we turn this into a problem where we can see more riots, more destruction? Because to be honest, if it bleeds, it leads. And this was kind of that Bill Maher thing was talking about. Yeah. They really just want how do we divide the country because it makes us more money? They're not going to say that on air. But
no, let's be honest. It motivates the voting base. It's going to motivate for people to come out and be active and get involved and run for office. And, again, we're seeing the Democrat Party having to revert to, or basically resort to, the most desperate of tactics to keep people engaged and involved. The more of that Republicans are seen as really what it always has been, which is, the party for everybody, a big tent party, it's a very fiscally, productive party, for the working class. I think Trump really moved the needle on that. And again, they know that race is becoming less and less of a factor for Republicans, election after election, and so they're getting desperate.
Yeah, and here's the problem with throwing the race card around. There is no defense for it. So right. You can say everything is racist, and there is no defense. And I'm not going to say, as a white person on camera here that I know what it's like. I don't, but when the media just keeps throwing that term around, like when we were talking about Georgia and the Jim Crow laws, I want to go, does anyone know who Jim Crow was? Like, can I just interview people and they go, I don't know what you're talking about? Then why say it on the news? I could ask every reporter, what are you talking about? They wouldn't know. But because the media hyped that one term up, it allowed them to get more viewers. And they
it's just become something that they say. It's just become a programmed response.
Right. And so that allowed them to kind of for this case, look at, oh, they're like, oh, this isn't justice. I go, but it is. It may not be. If you want 400 years of redemption, this case wasn't going to give it to you. I could have told you
Yeah.
that right off the bat. And do I think there's things that can be done for both police and education and everything else? Sure. I'm not
Yeah.
against that. I think there should be reform. But I can tell you this, defunding the police is not the answer. I mean, I can take the police out of 6 or 7 cities, and I bet in a matter of, I would say 3 weeks, you get Portland all over again. So you're not, and basically what you turned
I mean,
into
Portland
was,
has the police, and look at what shape it's in.
yeah. So you're literally you're not getting where you want to get. Now, I do believe this set a precedent for the blue line, which normally cops would always try to stick together on issues, and
Yeah.
rightfully so, because guess what? Have you been pulled a gun on you? Probably not.
Yeah.
Have I? No. Have I been in a situation where I had to stop somebody and you're like, do I flip a coin? This guy's going to kill me, or he's just going to hand me his license? I've never been in those situations. Now, I do believe people have been treated unfairly,
Yeah.
but if I had to go, that's the biggest problem this country is facing. That's the 0.01%. I'm gonna be honest. 90+% of cops are doing their job perfectly. Another 8% probably tote the line of maybe you took your authority too far. But the issues we see on TV are the 0.0001%.
Well, and again,
And
I mean, statistically, we've seen that the communities that would be the most affected by the defunding of the police are minority communities who don't want to defund the police in the first place.
right,
It's
and
only the
it's
far left radicals, again, BLM and people on the farthest left of the political spectrum that are trying to push this. But even people in their own communities want nothing to do with it.
yeah, and I think the BLM, and I don't know everything about the BLM. I can tell you what I do know is the person who, one of the top execs who runs it, just bought 4 homes, so they're
Right.
doing okay. And
Well,
so,
it's just the next generation of political charlatans. I mean, look at
yeah,
Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and how they've enriched themselves for decades on the back of the African American political movement, and the
right.
civil rights movement. I mean, this was nothing new. She pretty much just updated the playbook and realized, oh, hey, real estate investment seems to be a good idea, and she went ahead and went out there and bought a handful of properties.
Right. And I'm not a juxtaposition of the BLM movement. I think 98% of the people who believe in the BLM believe in probably the minor fraction of what they're trying to do, which is literally, let's make reform. Let's make sure the black community is treated fairly. They should be in almost all rights. And
Yeah.
again, I can look at just statistics on how the court treats the black and brown community. Guess what? I can just do the statistics, and this is not anything racist. White person gets busted with crack, and a black person gets busted with crack. The white
Yeah.
person probably gets a less sentence. Guess what? That is pure stats, and that shouldn't be. It should be fair across the
You're
board.
right, and there are legitimate problems there. There are
Correct.
some very legitimate cases or points made by the movement. The
Right.
problem is that they get bastardized by the leaders of the movement, who again are in it to enrich themselves and raise their personal prominence. And
Correct.
so that's where the message has gotten lost. But you're
Right.
right. I mean, there's no denying statistically in many of these cases, especially when it comes to justice reform, that there are severe changes that need to be made. And again, not that they want to admit it, but where
Correct.
did a lot of these problems stem from? Democrat liberal policies. When you're talking about mandatory minimums, when
Yeah.
you're talking about 3-strike rules, when there's all kinds of policies that have led to this that have mostly been enacted by liberal institutions, liberal legislations, and governors, and both from the White House on down.
And what I think, and I'll bring it back to the California buyers that we had. They go, what we're surprised about is how different things are here, and how people are open and free, and how polite and everything is. Because what we see on our side is we see all the problems in the very liberal states. And it's
Yep.
not to say they're wrong because of certain things. What we are saying is, like you said, they've gotten taken advantage of by creating a rah rah shish kebab, but you overlook the problems you're creating, and you
Yeah.
keep putting those people in office, and all of a sudden, like the one thing that I still baffles me, and we don't have it here, are tent cities. And I couldn't wrap my head around a tent
Right.
city.
Right. Right.
Well, that happened in California. And I said, well, the reason we don't have them here is because the government really doesn't police so hard the homeless population, but the people who are wealthy take it upon themselves to donate and basically made the government irrelevant in
Yeah.
5 of our major cities. We have Metropolitan Ministries and a few others, both Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, Orlando,
Right.
Jacksonville, that made the government irrelevant. The
Yeah.
wealthy people said, we're going to donate and we're going to give you a lot of millions of dollars to make little cities for these people, educate them, feed them, and then send them out to make their life better. And it's not to say Florida's the best. We have our own issues, but
Right.
we don't see the same drastic issues we see on the other side of the table. And we go, but don't you realize part of that was self-inflicted? And
Hmm.
we're not saying to be mean. It's just you have to take a look inward sometimes. And I feel like the liberals have really said it's always the rights problem.
Yeah.
Does that
No,
make
look,
sense?
yeah, no, absolutely, and it goes to show from a much more libertarian perspective that if you allow the citizenship to take ownership of an issue, that then the government becomes irrelevant and becomes unnecessary to solve certain problems. Can the citizenship solve all the problems? Who knows? I mean, possibly, but that's certainly one of them. And the government in this case, especially in places like California, have only made the problems worse. And it's not just there. I mean, it's along a lot of the West Coast states. They're having a problem with homelessness, and drug use and all these things that they've only exacerbated because they're trying to play the PC game, and it's working against them. Oh, I think I lost Nick there. Hopefully, he'll try to plug back in here in just a second. Thank you to everybody who's watching The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Johnny Torres with you. Thank you so much for watching. We have a lot to talk about today. One of our upcoming topics is going to be the California governor's race. Big announcement happened there last week. Also, we're going to talk about the local issue with the Hillsborough County mask mandate. Of course, that's being revisited soon. And, again, talking about, subverting the government, the Tampa Bay Young Republicans and some other groups decided to put on their own version of Gasparilla and decided to sidestep the cancellation of that event, even after the fact that we had a Super Bowl where we saw no spike in cases. The city still decided to cancel Gasparilla to their own detriment. And a lot of people took advantage and decided to still enjoy those festivities. And so kudos to them. As far as the Hillsborough mask mandate goes, well, we'll talk about that in just a bit. See if we can get Nick on here in just a second. Hang on. Thank you to everybody who's watching. I do see you all in the comments. Hello to Hector, Kimberly. Thank you for chiming in as always. You guys are awesome. Don't forget, you can download the audio version of our podcast over at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon platforms. And you can catch the video version of this show on YouTube and Facebook. All right, now going through some of the more recent comments here. Kimberly Davis said about the Floyd verdict that the judge gave them an appeal. Yeah, I mean, I think he certainly left it open for that. More than likely he'll see a reduced sentence. And Maxine Waters was the one, who also created a problem there. But again, I think that was intentional. I think she wants to, as they say, some people will just want to watch the world burn. And I think she's absolutely one of them. Portland continues to be a mess. I haven't looked into it lately about the Portland mayor turning 180. Oh, you're saying the state of emergency. Got it. Okay. So, again, I mean, that's a city that I don't understand why they allow Antifa and these groups that are destroying the city on a regular basis to continue to do so. It's almost as if they don't care that this is happening. But all right, let me see. Let me try one more time to get Nick on here. All right, Nick, if you're listening, all you'd have to do is just reconnect on that link. Let me see. Oh, it's logging back. Super frozen. Okay, got it. Okay. So again, thank you everybody for watching. We're going to see if we can get Nick back on here. How he's having a bit of technical issues. We certainly understand that. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and start to dive into the California governor's race. Is California ready for another Republican governor? The last Republican governor being, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who really leveraged his fame, his popularity, to go into office there. I think there was some mixed results as to his efficiency and effectiveness as a governor. But again, when you have the name ID that Arnold Schwarzenegger has, and the story, he's got an incredible immigrant story. It's it would be hard to beat that in any political race anywhere in the country. And then you tack onto that, obviously, that he's a self-funded candidate with enormous name ID. So yeah, and judging and looking at the comments here, um, quite a stretch to go from Arnold Schwarzenegger to Caitlyn Jenner, but that's exactly who has announced to run for governor in California, and so while uh, it just lends itself to, again, the insanity that is California, and certainly the obsession with reality TV stars, where, again, Arnold Schwarzenegger's governorship kind of predated that. But is that what it takes for a Republican to win in California? I mean, they're talking about um, potentially, a former head of the California Republican Party and a former member of the legislature in California running for governor as well. But again, does he stand a chance against somebody with the name ID of a Caitlyn Jenner? And certainly, when he kind of creeps in to certain groups, given the fact that he has transitioned from male to female. Does that give him some leverage in some of these LGBTQ groups where Republicans typically are not seen as being very friendly towards them? And again, it's one of these things where I think Trump opened up the door in some ways, with some of these social issues kind of being brushed aside because of the type of person he was, also coming from of the celebrity background. I think, he didn't make a lot of issue of the social issues that we often see that come up with Republican candidates. And so, do I think Caitlyn would be a good governor or even a good candidate? No. I think she's going to be a terrible candidate. I mean, she's not great on camera. She's not a great speaker. And again, look, personally, I don't mind. If you want me to call you a she, I'm fine calling you whatever you want me to call you. As long as you don't enforce your lifestyle or those beliefs on anybody else, I'm perfectly happy, identifying you as you wish, but again, we're already starting to hear from LGBTQ groups that he or she, sorry, is not representative of them. And that's going to be something that Caitlyn is going to have to overcome. Can she truly become a voice for the transgendered among national politics? Because it will be a national race, especially with her getting into it. And so, even among the Republicans, there's going to be a lot of discussion as to whether or not she's a viable candidate. And then also, are there going to be other, maybe more qualified candidates on the Republican side that will stand up? But I will tell you, politically, this is going to be the best opportunity that a Republican is going to have to win that seat in a long time. Gavin Newsom just about recalled. Don't know where kind of the last update is on that in terms of Newsom almost getting recalled by the very citizens of California. But certainly, as he felt the heat of that recall coming on, he started to reopen aspects of the state. Certainly, the ones that people tend to care the most about: Disney, sporting events, things like that. Even I don't even the Oscars somehow took place, and I didn't see people wearing masks at the Oscars. And so I think people were fed up with the quarantine. They were fed up with the lockdown, and the fact that the cases continued to be an issue. They continued to have spikes. They continued to have a large amount of deaths, and just really did not see this coronavirus being handled adequately by his administration. And so it may be the end of not only Newsom's career but Cuomo's career as well. And COVID may very well be the reason why their political careers will come to an end. Let me try one more time, see if we can get Nick in here. And also, I see you guys leaving me comments, so let me go ahead and yeah, look. I mean, great point, Kimberly. I mean, in California, apparently it was okay to have the Oscars, but it is not okay for kids to go back to school. It shows you where California's priorities are. Really does. And it's sad, it's unfortunate that that is the situation because if you haven't realized already that this coronavirus, while it may not have affected children health-wise, to the extent that we've seen in older individuals, what it is doing to their psyche, to their development, to their education, is devastating. And again, that's not going to be across the board. You have states that have fared better in this. Again, Florida, in terms of how they've managed to reintegrate students, back into learning. Again, not that it's been perfect here in Florida, but certainly, we haven't had the union battles that we've seen in Chicago, in California, in New York, where they'll lock down a school at the drop of a hat if there is a COVID case. And so again, it goes back to show you that these unions don't care about the students. It's never about the students. It's about protecting their pocketbooks and more so about protecting the teachers. Again, not that teachers shouldn't be protected, but their role is to teach. Their responsibility is to teach. They are being paid to teach. And aside from that, again, any doctor will tell you that's what's happening right now developmentally to kids who have been locked down now for approximately a year. That is going to have devastating effects on their development for many, many years. Let's see. Yeah, unions. Of course, it's all about the money with unions. And if DeSantis runs in 2024, will he be a Reagan for the 21st century? Look, I'll come right out and say this. Anybody who maybe remembers, the show 2 years ago, prior to DeSantis taking office, I was an Adam Putnam supporter. I still think the world of Adam, but there has been no bigger surprise for me politically than Ron DeSantis. He's been incredibly a positive. He has done some amazing things in places that I never thought that we would see a Republican really kind of taking the lead, especially when it comes to the environment and the Everglades. He is remember, prior to COVID, his approval rating was, I believe, north of 65%. He was well on his way to being a national superstar on both sides of the aisle here in Florida. COVID hit, and obviously that's been a huge challenge for any governor. But I think he could be that unifying element among Republicans, and certainly those independents and those even on the liberal side of the aisle, to get behind, a reasonable, experienced, young, dynamic, a person for president. He has. I like to knock him for his voice. Doesn't have like the strongest speaking voice, but his policies have been on point. And shout out to Chris Spencer, from the Tampa Bay area, who is an integral part of the governor's cabinet, especially when it comes to policy. And along the way, we've seen that the decisions he's made have been the right ones. His priorities have been the right ones. And the only time where he second guessed himself, which was the lockdown, and he put the state into a lockdown for a period of months, ended up backfiring on him. And I think that was a big lesson for him to trust his instincts, trust his gut feelings about how to handle these type of crisis situations. People forget he's an incredibly smart individual. I mean, he's an Ivy League educated attorney, served in our military as a JAG officer. And he is absolutely going to be hard to beat if he runs in 2024. I don't know anybody else right now that could step into that race and potentially go all the way. So yeah, good point about Adam. I fear that we may have lost Adam Putnam to corporate America. I mean, at least I've heard that's kind of what he's involved in these days. I'd love to see him back in public service. I'd love to see him give another run for governor. I think in a post DeSantis Florida, he could certainly win. And I don't know that there are many individuals that could, kind of hit the ground running like he could. Um, uh, Let's see. Hector says Ron DeSantis can be defined with one word: effective. He's all about the effect, not the flash. That's true. He's a very humble guy, but certainly quick to put a journalist in their place if he needs to. I like that he punches back, factually, like many attorneys would. Certainly, maybe with not Trump's flair, but certainly with a lot of that kind of gusto and certainly that lack of fear for the media. Let's see. So, what do we got going on here? It says I'd say have him stand by in case Rick Scott keeps his two-term limit word. Yeah, Senate is another thing. I think Rick Scott's going to make a go at it for president as well. We're starting to see some, if you read between the lines enough, you're going to see where Rick Scott is possibly trying to distance himself from DeSantis and maybe not be so gracious in complimenting him and giving him credit because again, it's no secret. Rick Scott, I think, is in this to make it a go to the White House, and it would be exciting, to once again have multiple candidates from the state of Florida. But I'll tell you what, there is no stronger candidate out there in terms of resources, in terms of work ethic than Rick Scott. And honestly, at this juncture, I mean, I think I still give DeSantis the edge because he has the likability that Rick Scott doesn't always tend to have. But again, Ron DeSantis again has a beautiful family. Casey, the first lady, is beautiful. They look great on camera. I think they would make for a very great narrative. For who should lead our country. Into the next decade, and a young family as dynamic and successful as the DeSantis have been, I think would certainly again make that for an interesting run. Let's see. Um, I'm still not convinced that Trump gives it another go. I think he's been there, done that. If you look at Trump and his history, he typically doesn't kind of go backwards and try to capture maybe lightning in a bottle for a second time. Um, a lot of people don't know behind the scenes. Obviously, he was a developer. Then, really, as his name became more of a brand, And certainly after his Apprentice celebrity, he started to license out his name and really didn't have as much of a hands-on role with a lot of the developments that carried his name. And so it's one of those things where I think he is just progressively moved on to other projects that interest him, other things that may call his attention. That being said, is he done with politics? No. Far from it. I think he's going to continue to be an influence in politics. I think the money is there for him. He's going to be a great fundraiser for the Republican Party. He's going to be someone who moves the needle in endorsements. Um, but I don't think he gives it another go for the White House. I don't see, not so much that he doesn't have the desire for it or the drive for it, but I mean, as we all can kind of read between the lines, Melania certainly didn't seem to have much of a care for being in the White House. Barron is obviously probably going to have moved on to college by then, and so he's going to continue to kind of be certainly a kingmaker in that respect, but I don't think he's going to be on the ballot anytime soon. Um, so again, going back to a comment here with Hector, yeah, Trump's going to be the patriarch of that family, but the ones you definitely need to watch are the siblings, and so Ivanka, Don Jr., they're all, I can guarantee you they are all angling for their next political move. Don Jr. continues to be very vocal on social media. Eric Trump, I think, while he's much quieter, I think he's certainly as ambitious. And Ivanka, I mean, I think is a superstar. Ivanka is somebody who I think could easily win office, even to the level of a congressional seat. I'd speculated or actually just wished or hoped that he would maybe challenge Debbie Wasserman Schultz down in Palm Beach County, given the location of Mar-a-Lago, because I think she could take her out, and that would be a huge win for Republicans. Now, some have speculated that she may run in New York. Obviously, that makes sense for the Trumps, and given her husband, I think they also again have strong roots in New York. So those the we haven't seen the last of Jared or Ivanka or Eric or Don Jr. I mean, I think that's all in the works. That's kind of where I think this whole Trump situation goes. Let me give this thing for Nick another try. I don't think he was able to get back on. Did you try to message me? Oh, here we go. Um, yeah. Let me see. Hold on one second. Sorry. Okay. Let's see if we can get him on again.
It
Oh,
should
there
be
we are.
on.
All right. Hang
Yeah.
on one second, because my headphones died. Give me 1 second here. Boop, boop, boop. You there?
Yeah. I got the gecko back though.
All right. Hopefully, it seems like it's going to cause a little bit of a feedback here. Or not feedback, but an echo. Let me see if I can get another set of headphones here to kind of make this work. But kind of wandered in and off of the California governor's topic, and just talking about how Caitlyn is going to be a terrible candidate. I mean, Caitlyn slash Bruce has never been very good on camera. Has never been very good at illustrating their political views or any views whatsoever. Obviously, even among the Kardashians, he's always been a kind of a pushover. Not a fighter, not really somebody that, again, seems to have a lot of spine. And look, I mean, politics in California are going to get real ugly. And I just don't think he has the name ID, he has the fame, but I don't think he has the pedigree to win.
Uh, Caitlyn Jenner, I saw that and I thought it was kind of a joke, similar to like Kanye West running. To be honest, I think both should run. See, give him a shot. At this point, Gavin Newsom, I don't think anyone in their state actually likes the guy. So, you know, does she have a shot? Sure. Um, but it's almost a mockery of their political system. I think if
Yeah.
even if she has a fraction of a shot. I think when everyone knew Kanye was running for president, it was kind of a chuckle, like, oh, sure. And even he backed out like 3 weeks after he announced it. I think still he got a few 100,000 votes. But, um, you know, Caitlyn, I really feel like if she ran, she would have a solid chance at picking up millions of votes. Now, I think since the surgery from Bruce to Caitlyn and the whole transfer of power in that household, I really don't know if he would even get the same support from his own Jenner clan. I mean, he's almost. I don't watch the show. I'm not a huge fan of
Okay.
whatever it is. But I'd be surprised if even the Jenner family backed him politically. I just never seen. I felt like since he became Caitlyn, he's almost been shunned out of the anything I've ever heard of the Jenner family,
Yeah.
except for the newest daughter, who's now a billionaire, and good for her.
Yeah.
The model, what's her name? I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Kylie.
Kylie, thank you.
Yeah.
And I would just be shocked if the Jenner family got behind him. If they did, he would have the financial power to potentially win California. I
Right.
just think it would be a mockery of the system if he did, or she did. Excuse me.
Well, that's the thing,
I
in a house full of women. I mean, like he's maybe the only. I mean, again, like all of the men in that family, just like the alphas are the women. The women are the alphas in that family. They're
yeah.
none of the men really have again much of a backbone there. I mean, if you look at not only the and I'm revealing way too much of my knowledge of the Kardashians, right? But if you look at like Courtney's husband, if you look at the Jenner brother, I'm forgetting the one that put on all the weight,
But
and
did you see the last episode? No, I'm just kidding. I haven't watched any of it. Johnny's over here like, oh my God, what a deal breaker. I can't believe it.
yeah,
No,
honestly,
it's,
Kanye West would probably have a better shot at winning governorship in California than Caitlyn would. And it again, I just the Hector saying, "Oh, the Jenner family will back him." Well, the Kardashian family will back him. The Jenner family, I don't know. I mean, because again, remember he left his Jenner family for the Kardashians.
right.
So who knows what's going to happen there. It's going to be a circus. Hopefully it doesn't distract from a viable candidate on the Republican side for that seat. But I think it's a
What
winnable seat. I think,
it
and maybe the first time in a long time.
and he's trying to run for governor. Is that correct? Am I
Right.
did I
Yeah.
see? Okay. So here's the problem: and this is kind of goes back to if Gavin Newsom runs again. I guess his only challenger can be a Republican. That makes it potential because no one likes him. I don't
Yeah.
think he has so many
But if he
nicknames that
gets
basically.
primaried, does he lose? And then I think that'd be the only way they could hold on to that seat is if he gets primaried and loses.
Yeah, and it's possible. I see California reverting back into themselves instead of looking inward. They're just going to let's get rid of Gavin Newsom and just get the next person that's identical to Gavin Newsom.
Right.
Oh, hey, we won. We got him out of there. No, well, you didn't. You got the exact same ideologies that put you in the situation you are financially. Do you remember? I would have said 3 or 4 years ago, where California said they were debating. And I don't know how far it went, but they were debating about seeding from the United States. And honestly, I think the United States said, "Please do. We're paying you
Right.
guys like $100 billion a year to stay. We'd make money." You
Well,
know, you could
and
take out.
while people want to look at GDP and say, well, California has larger GDP than most of the countries in the world. You're right; their fiscal management has been horrendous, and they continue to greenlight projects and initiatives that accomplish nothing. The high-speed train that they tried to sell us here in Florida was a complete bust in California, literally going nowhere, over budget, over timeline. I mean, it's been a huge disaster for them. Again, something that look in all in all honesty, I wish would succeed, right? Because a country as large as ours needs to have the next generation of transportation begin to take shape, because it's just we're at a point where our nation's demanding it. But I
Well,
think,
and
I mean, hell, we're going to have Brightline probably here in Tampa and Orlando before I think California ever gets its high speed rail or high speed train off the ground.
it's your what this is kind of that you let government dictate too much instead of making a decision, and either you fall flat on your face or you succeed.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to DeSantis, where he goes, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. I do not care what anyone says. And I wish a governor or a politician said, I am going to railroad every state and local law to put in a
Yeah.
high speed rail. To be honest, that's what China does. That's what South Korea does. That's what Japan does. And then they go, well, now we have one of the greatest municipalities because of it. And so they basically circumvented what we here do is try to get a bus line in and like, well, let's debate the environmental aspects of the bus line for the next 5 years. So you didn't get anywhere. And so inevitably someone has to make a decision. And in California, they don't have many good decision makers. And did you guys bring up, and you may have, they don't. Did you guys bring up how much the tent city cost? They made like a special tent city for COVID.
No.
Okay, so in San Francisco, it was a huge story like 3 months ago, and we brought it up on our podcast. They had like 212 tents. Do you know what they charged for 212 tents for taxpayers? I just want
What?
you to guess. $16 million.
Jeez.
I go 16 million. It was San
Holy
Francisco.
cow.
No wonder you guys needed $600 billion or 600 million to bail you out.
Right.
16 million. Shoot, you could have paid me three. My business partner would have gotten a million. I'd have gotten a million, and I'd have fed your whole homeless population for the next 3 years. How's that sound? But 16, and I would have saved you $13 million. But see, and that's the problem is they have these decision makers who are really just pointing to themselves, me, my money, without actually making a decision that could backfire. They just really just want the money and power themselves.
So let's go ahead and close out today's show with our final topic. Hillsborough County still having a mask mandate here, even though again our case numbers continues to drop. Our we had a lot of adoption of the vaccine, and we have people who think that again they're the small town. A mayor, putting in dancing restrictions if it's like footloose all over again. At what point do you say enough is enough? I mean, I think they sent a pretty good message to these people, with Trumparilla and whatever, the unofficial Gasparilla party that took place. Um, how much longer do you think we're going to have to put up with this mandate?
So I think as long as it gets you votes, and it comes down to the money and power. And this whole mask mandate is, and I've said this before, and I said it on my podcast, and I don't believe I've said it here. Basically, what politicians and the government and people have realized, the counties have realized they can do, is they can turn health into a commodity. The benefit, a commodity is sellable, a commodity is controllable. A commodity wins you votes and can change elections. That's what we've realized. So as long as you have that commodity, you can keep changing it. What a lot of people have realized, and I think most people knew the whole time, health is a personal responsibility. I take risks every day. Right now I'm drinking Crown and Coke. I know that's not the best for my health, but I still like it.
Right.
Water is better for me. I know that factually. So in 42 years, I may find out like, well, you probably should have been drinking Count and Coke. Crap, I knew that. Um, Same with going out. If you are afraid of going out, don't go out. You don't have to. We don't have to go out to a bar, club, or restaurant. Most of it can be brought to you if you wanted it. So the mask mandate is going to stay in place as long as a governor feels that if they make that decision, they win over votes. By saying, oh, let's open it up, then they run into the factor of, ooh, my son's friend got sick at a, you know, concert or bar, and because of that, you're the problem. So I'm not voting for you. And I saw the same thing in Orlando. We were there this weekend for my daughter's cheer competition. And it was very funny that going into the hotel, masks were mandated. The second you were in there, I would have said 1 in 4 people were in a mask. The mask was almost thrown in the trash.
Well, it gets to a
So
point where how do you even enforce it?
correct. And they can't, but as long as they can say it, that gives them the ability to say, we haven't made a mistake, right? And DeSantis rolled the dice on that. He basically said, I'm going to let you guys do everything. He did everything completely opposing what Biden did. Biden said, we might not have people enjoying 4th of July if we follow all these rules. The next day, DeSantis was at Bike Week shotgunning a beer. It was exactly the opposite of what Biden just said. And
Right.
then what we found out is there was no huge outbreak from the Super Bowl. There was no huge outbreak from Bike Week. There haven't been these massive outbreaks that the media have told us about. Now,
Right.
do I think as a country and as people we should be health conscious and keep very aware of our own health and others? Sure. But at the same time, we've realized if you let people dictate for themselves at some level what they find health conscious and health savvy and health risk, they'll manage it pretty well on their own. Um, if I had 6 people in my household that were all very very highly risky, and if they got COVID, it could kill them, right? And they would be the
Yeah.
0.01% population that could be a problem. Yeah, I probably would go out less. I probably would eat out less. I understand those things. But guess what? I run into the same 6 to 10 people in my life all the time. So I
Mhm.
know all those people are probably on the same wavelength as me. So I think you're going to see it as long as it keeps winning votes. The second it stops winning votes, you'll see it taken away.
Right.
I guarantee it. You'll see it instantly. I'll be honest. If Biden loses this, I guarantee if what's his face is still in office or running the CDC guidelines, he'll say, "Oh, I don't believe in masks anymore." It's just, as long as it doesn't win votes, it's over.
Yeah,
Does
look,
that
and
make
Hector
sense?
makes a good point, which is that they're not going to lift it until it's politically expedient to do so. The mandate is a middle finger to Ron DeSantis and the Florida Republican Party on the part of the majority of the Board of County Commissioners and the city of Tampa. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think when you're talking about a rule that the governor has pretty much said, look, I mean, you can try to enforce this all you want, but your fines are going to be null and void. You have zero enforcement capability. Again, you know, that obviously, puts them in an awkward position. And all they can really do is continue to hold out and enforce a mask mandate that, again, by all means, has proven to be unnecessary and irrelevant.
Yeah, and DeSantis, and this is what I hope for Trump is he puts his ego aside at some level and realizes he could be the Don in the background pulling all the strings for years. His
Right.
whole family could. And I'll be honest, I think DeSantis and Laura Trump make a killer ticket. If she wins the Senate seat, which I think she's running for, and he decides to run, I would be impressed if that ticket lost next to the current party we have. I think
Yeah, I
if
don't think DeSantis needs a Trump on the ticket, though, to win. I mean, and
no, but I think I don't know who his backup would be. I just don't want a backup with no value. And I'm afraid we'll do the same thing that the Democrats did. Let's pick the one candidate you can't use anything against. So let's get a half black, half Indian woman on the ticket. Boom, nailed, checked 4 boxes. We're good. And I honestly said I think the only way the Republicans lose is they don't put DeSantis as the front runner, which he already is, not even putting his hat in the ring. And then I think the other part, the only other reason we would lose after that is if Kamala Harris is not VP and somehow becomes president. I think if she becomes president, it's a tough ticket to beat, no matter who it is. But if she stays VP, it's the most beatable ticket of all tickets
See, I
because he is the
disagree. I
worst.
think I think Kamala is not likable at all. I mean, she helped bolster enough of the black vote, right? For people not to stay at home, which is what Democrats feared the most. But again, I think Kamala by herself. I think she'd lose. I mean, hand over
But we're
fist.
not we're not voting against. We're right. We're not winning against Kamala. We're winning against the NFL, NBA, CNN,
Right.
ABC, MSNBC. That's who we're fighting. What are they going to talk bad about? About a mixed, Indian black woman,
Sure.
um, woman running as president? To be honest, that's why I said I wish Condoleezza Rice ran 8 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever she could have
Yeah.
ran. And the NFL said we're going to pay you a couple million, and she says peace out. And I don't blame her. I'd have done the same. Um,
Well, Condi
and
is. I think she's more of a policy wonk. She's not of the political class. You know what I mean? And I think you need
right.
to, and if you're in D.C. and you've been on the mountaintop, if you want to subject yourself to that type of criticism and pressure and negativity. I think she's kind of seen there, been there, done that, and she's more of a policy wonk, I think, than a political person. And I guarantee you, she wants no part of the political process.
Well, and that's she made that clear when she took the NFL job because they
Yeah,
I think the Republican Party was pretty much just handing her the keys to the throne. They're like, if you win, we knock out 5 demographics. You're brilliant, and we would love to win the presidential nomination. And she just kind of, I think she was in a back room somewhere. She was given the nod, which I think still happens as much as we would like to think it's all a perfect political process where the people pick somebody. There's a back room somewhere where these people are handpicked and how it plays out. And I get it. There's a lot of money involved and power. Um, and she walked. But what I don't want to see is us put up. I personally think if we see something that Trump runs again, he's not. What we found out is you can't beat 48 news stations. In leagues and everything else. Why did Georgia? What was it? The MLB All Star game got pulled from Georgia because of
right,
a
right.
decision. Come on, do you guys even know what that is? No. You just try to look good for your fan base who's paying you. What we found out is 80% of their sales come from inner cities. So, well, we got to look good for the inner city just to make more money. So it didn't matter what was said. They were just like, we're just going to make it look good for us.
Well, same
And
reason with the NBA. The NBA
right,
it doesn't actually care about social causes. They care about their pocketbooks, which is why on one side of their mouth they're obviously wanting to talk about BLM, and on the other side of their mouth they are staying quiet when it comes to the Muslim Uyghur situation in China and what's happening with the internment camps and the working,
well, and they even
the enslaved camps in
I'll be
China.
honest. We didn't bring this up against the verdict, and I'm a LeBron fan. I'm not against him. I think what he's done with his money is actually admirable. I think coming from out of nowhere as a high school student to be honest, a relatively good class act NBA All Star. Because I'll be honest, if I was 20 years old making $100 million or something crazy number a year, I'd be on yachts with 48 women. Like I would not be your perfect citizen
Yeah.
basketball player. I mean, I give him a lot of credit for all that. He grew up way faster than he should have, took care of his family. But when the cop recently did everything right and you said you're next, pulled that down, I'll be honest, any other player did something similar, they'd have lost all sponsorship and been out of the league in a
Oh yeah.
heartbeat. They'd have been, let's assume Tom Brady did that for any person. Tom Brady would not be in the league anymore. That's how fast
Well,
it could
but
have
the
gotten
thing
real.
is now
And
that
he's a legend.
those brands also now feel socially pressured to have to support this. And obviously there's a limit there. And I think had this gone maybe further south on LeBron than he had intended, I mean, you might have seen some sponsorships jump ship there. But he pulled the tweet, but then he tweeted afterwards. He
Well, he
said
doubled
that
down
he
on it.
didn't
He
pull the
doubled down
tweet.
on it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's if you're going to stand up for civil rights and you're going to stand up for social equality and social justice, then why are you playing footsies with China? And why do you continue to placate China when it comes to them censoring your political views? Because they have. Remember how many basketball players, were punished for speaking out about China.
Well, and it's I apologize if I say this, it's the Uyghur Muslims. Am I saying that correctly?
Right. Yeah, Uyghur
Yeah,
Muslim.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's my ignorance or at least partial knowledge of what's going on. But I do know that America needs to be the front runner here and step up. And I don't care what your political views are. We saw this in 1940, 1930, when basically Germany started persecuting Jews. Now they didn't have gas chamber. They don't have gas chambers yet, but they've suctioned off like 300,000 people and are going to
Yeah.
try to commit genocide or at least a slavery workforce at a massive amount to create much of the stuff we use today. I'm sure my cup that I'm drinking out of probably was made in China. Um,
Yep.
so, those are the things where you kind of have to go take a step back, and America just can't, to be honest, bend it over and take it up the rear. And that's literally what we're doing, in my opinion. But if
Yeah, but I think if
America,
you were to basically implement some again, if you were to like raise import fees, if you were to raise sanctions on China, really, I mean, aggressively go after their pocketbook, I think it's inevitable that there's going to be American companies that step up to the plate and say, okay, well, now that it's more of a competitive landscape, I'm going to go ahead and make these, cups, and I'm going to go ahead and make these little plastic things and
well,
make,
and that's
all the stuff that's coming from China, and obviously it would take a little while for them to catch up. But I do think that American manufacturing would step up to the challenge if it were a level playing field.
And I think they would step up only if the ideology stepped up, right? If you forced all of these major companies to kind of look inward, and if they start, let me be honest, if Amazon said we have opted out of social injustice to stop shipping China stuff, the rest of the country would follow suit.
Right.
I also think if America stepped up to the plate and said, we are going to hold our own personal Olympics in Atlanta, where the last one I think in America was, in honor
Yep.
of not supporting China, and we will welcome every other country, I guarantee we would have almost everyone that was like from the European Union probably follow suit. That
Yeah.
Atlanta could hold it in an instant. DC
Sure.
could hold it in an instant. And it
Florida
wouldn't be
could.
to make Florida could. We could hold it in 16 cities and we'd be totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, I think if America stepped up that way, China would have to look inward and either say, we're going to play ball, or what China's been trying to do, and everyone just thinks they're just polite and nonchalant, they're going for world domination. And
Yeah.
and if you're not aware of that, then you've really missed the mark because they're an authoritarian government that just does what they want. And so if they would have said, no, we're still going to hold it in China, whoever comes here, fine, and we're just going to rage, just be enemies, maybe not physical enemies, but
Hmm.
economic enemies from here on out, it really would show the coin of China they don't want to show, which is, hey, we are being not only politically but ethically extremely to the extreme of I can't believe it's not talked about more extreme. Like we're talking
Yeah.
about potential genocide of a third of a million people, like that over political or over views I may not agree with, but like
Yeah.
an extreme amount of not political, religious differentials. It's awkward to say that everyone's okay with it, and that's I don't know what we or Muslims believe, but what I can tell you is I don't think one country or one religion is okay with pure genocide. So
Right.
it's awkward that the United States just looked the other way, and this is going to come back to bite us in 2 to 10 years, and that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, I think so. If we don't step up, at some point it is going to come back to bite us. And again, it's one of those unfortunate situations where if we don't do something about it, who will?
No one else will. Yep, no one
Yeah.
else will,
So,
because
well,
everyone else knows we supply it.
well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Again, thank you everybody for watching the Yard Sign, the most important relevant podcast in politics. Don't forget to sign up for the audio version of our podcast on the Tech Overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon. You can subscribe there, and please share, like, leave us a comment. I'm going to wrap up today's show the way that we always do, and with Nick is no different. What story are you watching right now that we didn't get to talk about today?
Oh man, shoot. It's probably gonna be something lame. Like, I'm probably gonna see which Instagram model has a cool story right now, and then watch that one. I can't
Well,
think of anything off the top of my head.
I'll go ahead and say this. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay in my headphones, so it's kind of throwing me off. But I will say, unfortunately, it looks like we may have another bout of red tide surfacing.
Oh,
Just south of us, over in the Sarasota, Manatee County area, and of course that devastated our beaches for quite some time. Obviously, if you were in Pinellas, most of the time you were in the clear. Overall, I mean, it affected large parts of the state. Again, red state, a naturally caused, I don't even know what to call it, just an episode that seems to happen and seems to be happening with more frequency. Hopefully, it'll subside and disappear. But again, it would just, as we're now creeping out of this coronavirus situation economically, here in Florida, where, restaurants, hotels are seeing record numbers, it would suck to then, have to revert
right.
to red tide issues and have that, be a detriment to our local businesses again.
Well, I will follow up with that story real quick with the side note. I would like to see how DeSantis. I would like to see him lay down the hammer on the company that holds the dams or the water reservoirs for the counties down there. I
Yeah.
would like to see. It's been enough time where if he steps up and lays the hammer, he's setting himself up for doing the just thing for injustices for backroom deals, right? That
Yeah.
you're not sufficient, you've caused massive wildlife and home damage, you're in trouble, we're getting someone else in, you're fired, you might have political or economic and or prison time based on what you've done if you knew about it, and we're going to get someone in there to do something right. And I would like to see that
Yeah.
play out. It may not, but I would like it.
Well, see, and that's the biggest, miscategorization or misrepresentation about Republicans is that, we don't care about the environment. And again, if anything, I would challenge that Republicans maybe love the environment more than Democrats do. I mean, when you talk about boating, when you're talking about hunting, when you're talking about, the different activities that Republicans enjoy, and take part in nature. Again, I'm excited, to hear Ron DeSantis talk about and do things when it comes to restoring the Everglades and to making sure that, that again, some of these chemicals and some of these manufacturing facilities aren't polluting our nature and our environment, because one of the things I've said on this show before, um, our environment is our economy. People come
Big
here
time.
people come here because of the beach. People come here because of the Everglades. They come here for the hiking trails. They come here to hunt and fish. And if we don't protect those ecosystems, it's going to be devastating to Florida's economy in the long run.
Agreed.
So, well, Nick, thank you again for joining me on the show. Hope to have you back again soon. And sorry about all the little technical things here and there. But maybe next time we'll be together in person for the next show.
Uh-oh. Breaking up again.
Are you there?
Oh, I'm back. I think the technical difficulties were because the Google overlords heard how good our podcast was, and they didn't want anyone else to know about it. They were
Of
like, "We got to shut it
course.
down now. They're speaking truth. We got to shut it down. Shut it
That's right.
down." Uh, or it's that my memory is crap and it just crapped out. But I'm going to blame it on Google and Apple because that's easy.
That's what I always do. So thanks again, Nick, and thank you everybody for watching. Again, this has been the Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. We'll see you back here next week again, Monday night, 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for watching. See you, everybody.
Cheers.